Hi folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. On this week's show, we're here with CJ Hunt, the man behind the hit documentary, The Perfect Human Diet. Among other things, you're going to learn why you should not get your health information from the news and media. Take it from CJ, he's an insider. So before we get to the show, I'm going to share the review of the week. This one is from Tony, and he says, life-changing. I stumbled onto this podcast, and it has changed my life. I've lost 73 pounds, and more importantly, I'm off all my meds. I had been on blood pressure and statin medications for 20 years. I'm a zealot, and I'm learning more about nutrition every day. Tony, we need more zealots like you. Keep on fighting the good fight, and congratulations, man. So if you've changed your body and life, and you want to let me know, go ahead and leave a review on iTunes for Fat Burning Man, or wherever else you might be listening to or watching this show, Stitcher, YouTube, anywhere. Or if you just dig this show in general, please take a quick second to leave a review. It really helps get the word out there to more people. You can also always drop me a line at abel@fatburningman.com to share your story, your before and afters, or anything else. Always love hearing from you guys. So I want to remind some of you newer listeners who might not be familiar with some of my backstory why I started the Fat Burning Man show. In my early 20s, I followed my doctor's advice. I ate low fat, almost zero dietary cholesterol. I was told to exercise more and also take pills for sleep, allergies, underarm sweat, high blood pressure, and more. But over the course of time, I was getting fatter and sicker. And I didn't want to be popping pills for the rest of my life. So when my apartment building burned down, this is the Cliff Notes version, I took a good hard look at my reflection in the mirror, which is basically all that I had. And my face was inflamed. I was overweight. I was pretty much out of gas, out of energy. And despite following this advice so well from my doctor and the traditional media, eat less, exercise more, and all of the other conventional wisdom, it was clear that that was not working for me. So I decided to dig in and do a lot of research and try something different. And one of the things that shocked me was once I started treating food as medicine, exercising in a different way, getting back to my roots, essentially going outside, having fun and playing again, my body responded so quickly. I lost 20 pounds in just over a month. I went back to being a young, strapping youth like you're supposed to be when you're young and energetic. And I wanted to help spread the news, essentially showing that there is an alternative, because I was kind of mad. I was following the bad advice really, really well, and that's what was making me fat and sick, the pursuit of health. So I started this show as a free show that would be uninfluenced by commercialism, conventional wisdom, drug companies, supplement companies, and all the rest of that stuff, so that we could bring alternative health to as many people as possible. So I started this show to help listeners like you reclaim your health and happiness by eating real food, exercising outdoors, and making simple changes to your habits. Now, I've been approached by an ungodly number of companies that want to advertise on this show, but I want to keep it as independent and uninfluenced as I can without losing my pants, paying for the software, the hosting, and the wonderful team that helps me get this show out to you. So the way that I cover the costs of hosting, software, editing, and other expenses in bringing the show to you is by creating courses, ebooks, apps, and a premium online community for listeners and readers who want the best content all in one place. So this week, I hope you'll consider joining us in our premium online community, the Fat Burning Tribe. It's where we share our outrageously tasty recipes, fat burning workouts, and healthy living strategies. We have a Facebook group with hundreds of members from all over the world sharing successes, meals, and tips for living a better life. We update the members area at least 3 times a week with a new video, recipe, article, or exclusive giveaway. And every month, my wife Allison and I hop in front of the camera and answer your questions on how to upgrade your health in a world that sometimes seems like it's stacked against us. So if you'd like to join our community, we've opened up a few spots for you to join for just $1 for your first month. We'll be closing the doors on that particular offer very soon, so don't miss out. Just go to fatburningtribe.com to sign up. All right, so on to the show with CJ Hunt. On this show, you'll learn why you should not get your health information from the news, the surprising role of animal foods in the true paleo diet, how the media machine tries to confuse us, why you should eat marrow and brains, and much more. All right, let's go hang out with CJ. All right, folks, we're here today with CJ Hunt, the writer, producer, and host of the breakout film hit, The Perfect Human Diet. A modern-day renaissance man, CJ has enjoyed a career that spanned motocross racing and theme park announcer to over 20 years in broadcasting and voiceovers, TV host, television and movie actor, and author. We're going to have some fun. How's it going, CJ?
Good, and that's all shocking but true.
I love it. I love it. So we got to meet at the very first Paleo Effects conference in Austin, Texas. It's more than 3 years ago now, I guess. Which was such an exciting moment. Pretty much everybody was there who's somebody now, right? Like, except everyone was nobody there except for Mark Sisson, I think.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think Rob's book may have just really started skyrocketing. And Lane Sebring was there, and I'm sure we'll talk about him. And yeah, it's very interesting. And it was interesting to watch since. I know we'll talk about that, about who emerged and who grasped the idea and wanted to run with it. So
and what the media did with it since then too.
Oh my God. Yes, we will have to talk about that.
We will talk about that, but let's start with, in case people aren't familiar with your background, you have a pretty compelling story of when you were 24 years old out jogging. What happened?
Oh, yeah. I lived in Los Angeles at the time, and I was a motocross racer, a dirt bike racer. And actually, I was just about to turn pro, rode somebody else's bike and hurt myself. I know athletes do stuff like that, when they don't want to miss a competition or miss a week. And I was jogging to get back in shape, and I went out Memorial Day 1978 at Beverly Hills High School and went a lap and a half and dropped dead. And, at 24, you feel you're pretty invincible. Yeah. And I just got a little lightheaded and thought, oh, gee, I don't want to face plant in the gravel. And I remember looking at the grass, and that was the last thing I remembered until I was being brought back out of it. And luckily enough, there was an anesthesiologist who showed up to go jogging at the track within the next couple of minutes. And he, if you had to have anybody come try to rescue, an anesthesiologist, he started working on me till the paramedics got there, and then they got there and, jump-started me and took me to UCLA Medical Center in West LA, which is the big, now it's Ronald Reagan Medical Center, where I spent 10 days in intensive care while they tried to figure out what had gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And it was just a very scary experience, and after coming out of the hospital, there was there was additional things that impacted me and my interest in health. I mean, they put me on beta blocking drugs 4 times a day, which made me, depressed and sitting on the couch all day, and changed my hair and my skin. And, I sat around crying a lot, which was undignified.
Yeah, sure.
So at that time, and, but all of this really sparked a huge interest in health and wellness. And my God, if I'm 24 and I'm healthy and I'm fit, what else can I do, or what else can I learn in order to first help myself be healthier? And then later down the line, when it became a professional interest, it's how can I share these discoveries with others? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was very, very, very scary. I mean, the main thing I remember was when they were bringing me back too, is the feeling of being lifted into the ambulance and then being moved down, and you hear the sound go quiet around you because you're being moved into this space, and they close the door, and then they start poking you, seeing if you can remember anything, and and then they say, well, you seem to be doing good. You're remembering these things. And I said, well, how could you know? You didn't know me before. I actually said that to the tech. It's the ER guy.
You were sassy back then.
I was. My defense system was to, try to turn it into humor. Mm-hmm. But in fact, this very brief aside, the one place out of this whole football field that I fell on gum. That stuck really? In my hair. That stuck in my hair. No one else knows this but you, and now your million listeners. That they had to cut out in the ER. It's like, jeez. Oh God, I know. It's talk about life, laughing,
right,
under the most dramatic circumstances. But yeah, it was a wake up call, no doubt about it.
And one that I think a lot of people are suspiciously close to today without even realizing it. A lot of the things, putting on fat or whatever and wanting to lose it is one thing that kind of gets people interested in this a little bit, but more often people have a serious problem with their health that brings them into this kicking and screaming because they absolutely have to. So how has your experience as it relates to diet and health changed since then? What do you wish that you knew then that you know now?
Well, I wish I knew what I learned when I went on this journey to make the documentary then, because it would have made a big difference. I mean, when internet didn't exist, there was not a big health movement other than kind of the fruits, nuts, and flakes kind of idea in California back then. And to learn anything about health, I had to go to the metaphysical bookstore in
the metaphysical bookstore.
The metaphysical bookstore. Wow. Because Barnes and Nobles, if they were even there,
right.
The regular bookstores didn't really cover that. It wasn't popular like it is now in the same fashion.
Sure.
Yeah, and if you wanted to find anything that was alternative, anything that was a different point of view, that's where you went to go. So besides finding Shirley MacLaine's latest book, you'd find Arnold Ehret, who's the fruitarian guy, and the whole range of macrobiotics was just becoming really popular in Los Angeles, and so that's where I got my initial education, and where I thought, well, I could do fasting, I could do juicing, I could do all of these things, because none of that's new.
People think it is.
Yeah, they think it is because they just heard about it.
Right.
But yeah, it only exists because of people like Paul Bragg, and Jack LaLanne, and this whole early movement in the United States that, is at least as old as most of your audience's grandparents, if not more.
Yeah. Banting, right? Low carb before the turn of the century.
Well, and the thing is Banting wasn't really a story that was known over here at the time. Atkins was kind of popping up. Like I said, I'm almost 62, so this is 40 years ago, and roughly. Don't hold me to my math. The main things that I were able to come across that were from Europe was things like fruitarianism and fasting and things like that. The other thing that hit about that time too was Harvey and Marilyn Diamond, Fit for Life, and so they got some TV time, and they were the ones that were into natural hygiene, which is where you don't eat proteins and carbs together, basically. And in the morning, you should have fruit up until lunchtime, and then pick a vegetable and a carb, and a vegetable or a meat, and same thing for dinner, and keep that all separate. And so those are the things that were available to try that were different than, Weight Watchers, to try to get healthy and whatnot. So I went through a litany of those things, and it was before most people started doing their own blood work or testing and those kinds of things. You just did it, and like these N1 experiments that people are doing. And or is it N equals 1?
Yeah, either way.
Whatever. So that's what I did, and I was a raw food vegan for 5 years. In, like I say in the movie, until my mom was killed, and the emotional stresses became too much, and it revealed to me that my diet, no matter how well intentioned, wasn't working. I didn't feel good anymore, and I did water fasting and juicing and all that, like I said. And eventually, after that incident with my mom passing and whatnot, a little voice in me, and it sounds very metaphysical, just said, eat fish. And it's kind of like, eat fish.
Yeah.
So I finally gave into that, and I started feeling much better. And I still ate mostly raw foods and lots of fresh salads, and what we would now call real foods.
Yeah.
And all that, along with adding protein sources, and healthier fats were always part of that whole vegetarianism idea back then. So that's what I did. And then, it was many years later that Protein Power came out, where I saw the first inkling of the Paleolithic diet and things
Yeah.
like that. It was the complete unknown, and Banting wasn't popular, and Atkins, he was vilified,
Right.
in the press. So yeah, none of this whole, eating more protein or animal foods was good
Yeah.
back then. Yeah, in
It's a
fact, you were.
vastly different world. Now, what about when you made your documentary? You were coming in as a journalist, and you've kind of transitioned into an advocate. Can you talk about how that happened and why?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's after the film came out, I thought, okay, this is it. This is kind of a seminal work for me.
Hmm.
This is a message I really wanted to share. Discovered all sorts of things I never expected, and interviewed all sorts of people I never anticipated meeting. Um, and then people started sending me emails saying, well, what about this, this, and this? And I said, well, it was in the movie.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself. And I said, but it does go by pretty fast and there's a lot going on. So I would write back and I'd say, well, here's the human food list and here's the non-human food list. But I would quote, Dr. Sebring, and then so I would get more of that. And then there became a couple of Skype-related live shows back east. And every time someone in the audience would go, well, what about the China study?
Yeah.
Being very defensive and very upset.
Sure.
Because people don't like their belief systems challenged. And it seems in our species. So I'll just keep going down with caveats. And so those things happened. But what really got me ultimately, and they kept asking for lists and resources and books. And because that stuff was just starting to come out, there were only a few places you could turn people to as resources at the time, like Rob, and honestly, I didn't push Marx very much because Marx didn't follow the scientific discoveries of the film, So I tried to just kind of lean people in that direction without saying, being negative about anyone else because everyone's on a different kind of a pathway there.
Sure.
Then we did some live screenings, one in Reno, like with Rob, and I was asked by one of our post-production sponsors, was U.S. Wellness Meats. They sent us a little money to help get it done. No editorial input, but just nice people.
Yeah.
And they said, well, hey, we want to do a screening out here in Missouri. In Canton, Missouri, which is a little riverbed town where they come from. And so I went there and, and met with them and had a really nice, it was a really interesting evening. And the little movie house they had was pretty much packed. And afterwards, in meeting and greeting some of the folks there, a lady came up to me who was probably 65-ish, all silver-haired, and started talking to me because she identified with my personal story. She had had acute hypoglycemia and a declining energy and health for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And she took my hand and we were chatting, and she says, this gives me hope that I can feel better.
Yeah.
And that just, that just cut me to the core in a good way. It really touched my heart, which sounds like, a little, woo woo, but it did. And so I thought, okay, it's time to get off the dime. And people keep asking for stuff. So why not, follow up, go more deeply into the discoveries and share that, and then also share more about the how-to, the practice, because that's what people want to know afterwards. Yeah. Because people struggle, they've got favorite foods, and they said, well, we really like beans and rice. And I said, well, I'm glad you really like beans and rice, yet here's the science, and you can try having these things instead, or and also why the how-to in the book is based on Dr. Sebring's work. And you're probably well familiar with the fact that he has been practicing these ancestral health ideas and evolutionary nutrition with his patients longer than anyone in the U.S. And so, he's had the time in the trenches with these people to see what works and what doesn't work. And so in his practice.
Yeah.
So let's
talk about that a little bit. The how to, what does work, what doesn't work? What are some of the misconceptions about the paleo approach to all of this?
Well, let me set this up a little bit by saying is that the paleo movement, and I know some of you folks have already been talking about, when I say you folks, popular podcasters in the paleosphere, that it's it's become the money word. Mm-hmm. And you can call anything you want paleo in order to sell it right now. It's gold, mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that has, of course, changed the original message that was put out by Lauren Cordain and subsequent science mm-hmm. Of evolutionary nutrition. So one of the things that I think in our discussion here, when we say, who's right, who's wrong, human foods, non-human foods, is that the vast majority of people I have seen online go back to the same kind of quote in the film, which is the 2.5 million years of human evolution. Mm-hmm. What we miss, I think, is that the Paleolithic period is not all about modern humans. There are 3 distinct periods. There's a lower, a middle, and an upper. Mm-hmm. And the real story arc is us becoming more and more meat eaters, more and more animal foods, more and more marrow, mm-hmm. more and more brains, that led to the emergence of modern humans, you and I.
Yeah.
So we're not really there during that 2.5 million years. Mm-hmm. We're there at the end.
Right.
At this thing called the Upper Paleolithic. And I think a lot of people say, well, Homo erectus was coming out of Africa and they were eating tubers, therefore I can eat tubers. That's not an accurate rationale when you look at the science. Mm-hmm. That what modern humans ate when they were at their peak was mostly animal foods. And this is not me making this up, right? This is the Max Planck Institute and their discoveries from all over the world. Mm-hmm. Now, wherever and whenever modern humans could get it, they preferred medium and large herbivores. Yeah. We eventually expanded into eating more fish inland and in the sea.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff shows up in this radioisotopic bioanalysis. Very detailed. It's really interesting. You can tell, where it came from mm-hmm. effectively. So, and that's what developed the SMART, so that when our resources started changing or dwindling or moving, we moved into places where all those resources were not available, then we were able to expand our survival strategy.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, there's a big difference between thriving and surviving. Mm-hmm. So as far as a species is concerned.
Yeah.
So I think that as a setup, and there's some other things we can talk about in our hour about the spread of agriculture and what people were eating and what they weren't eating and all that, which is the position I'm coming from.
Yeah.
It's an evolutionary lens, not my personal N1 experiment idea. Mm-hmm. It's that the how-to, which is the human foods and the non-human foods, started with the original evolutionary nutrition or paleo diet idea that started with Lauren Cordain. And then I think in some ways, and it's no disparagement meant towards Lauren, but Lauren's not a doctor. Mm-hmm. Lauren sent me to Dr. Sebring because he said, you need to go talk to that guy because he's changed half the town.
Yeah.
And Dr. Sebring has had 15 years plus in working with people who have had all sorts of problems and helping them recover their health with all the medical records to back it up, and the different trials that those patients went through, because some people didn't want to give up this or stop eating that, and then what happened when they did change what they ate. And that's what led to the development of the human foods and the non-human foods idea. Mm-hmm. And in the book, that's the list that comes out. It's based on that kind of field testing in Dr. Siebing's practice, because, you know, because of that. Exactly. It's not me making it up and seeing what sticks when I throw it at the wall,
Right.
or what my peers think is a good idea, or any of that. So am I getting to the question, or am I trying to backfill too much?
Well, let's get to the human foods and the non-human foods, just for people who aren't necessarily familiar with the original paleo diet from an evolutionary perspective.
Right. And as I'm sure most of your folks know that have followed Lauren Cordain, know that he's shifted some of his positions as he's learned more as well. But here's the quote. I'll read it so that I get it exactly right. The way that Dr. Sebring gave it to me, he breaks food into two categories: human food and non-human food. And the human foods would be lean meat, chicken, fish, turkey, etc., preferably from an animal that's eating what it's designed to eat, and fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Non-human foods are grains, and he says, which is probably the worst problem we've got. Dairy after 2 years old. We're not designed for dairy after 2 years old, our species, and certainly not from another animal. And then beans and potatoes. So those are the simple categories he puts them in, because it helps people understand it, and it makes it easier to use when they go to the supermarket. Is that what could be simpler but two lists? Well, here's a list of what you're designed for, and here's a list of what you're not designed for.
Right.
To try to make it easy to choose. And I know this is another one of the things in the paleosphere, and that when I look out there, that is a subject of much debate.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, people like to fight for the things that they like, and they don't want to, and people don't want to change. When I first interviewed Lauren Cordain and Mike Eads years and years ago on an earlier project called Diet Evolution, over the phone, because we didn't have this,
Right.
One of the things that they said, and it was that it was tough getting people to change from what their friends and their family and whatnot are doing.
Sure.
And I called up a company that had become very popular at the time called the Keto Company, because they made low carb foods. And I called him up and I said, okay, what you making? What's that all about? And he says, well, we're in business because people don't want to change. They want to have keto pancakes, and they want to have keto chips, and they want to have keto pasta, and all that kind of stuff. So, and that was, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And now there's another wave of that now has a paleo label on it. Is that, people have a difficulty changing, and or circumstances that they feel make it difficult to change dramatically. And even if they go 30 days strict, have wonderful results, I don't know what it is in us, but some of us, we're curious. We want to go, well, okay, do I have to really do this all the way?
Yeah. Right.
Can I do I have a little fudge room? And then that fudge room, of course, depends on your health and your age and your well-being and your activity level and those kinds of things. So I'm kind of vamping here. Am I still on? At all?
As you see it, and what you learned in interviewing all these experts for the perfect human diet and kind of the original paleo, what are the foods that you think a lot of people who call themselves paleo are missing out on, that are actually truly paleo? You know what I mean?
Oh, well, the list that's based on the scientific evidence is mostly animal foods. And I think,
and weird ones, right? Like, for instance, I'm drinking bone broth right now, which has a bunch of marrow in it, and marrow has become one of our favorite foods. And I don't know that many paleo people who are out there eating brains, but I know a lot of people who are paleo eating paleo pancakes, right? So there's an interesting dichotomy between what paleo actually should mean, in an evolutionary sense, and what it means in marketing terms in today's parlance.
Oh yeah, and what you can get when you go down to the local supermarket. I mean, just the folks, what's available in towns that have Trader Joe's and Whole Foods is a lot different than towns that only have the A&P, although I think they just went under. So on the East Coast,
yeah.
Or Safeway or Albertsons or whatever your local market is. And it's not common in the American diet, in my experience anyway, to eat brains and all these other organ parts and whatnot. We were all literally, when I grew up, it was pretty white bread, and it was, things were. It was better if it was white. It was better if it was purified. It was better if it, it didn't resemble anything in nature.
Right.
If it came out of a can, or you boiled it to death and those kinds of things. So, and I agree with you. I think that's one of the things about adopting this kind of a life, because I don't really think it's a lifestyle. I think it's the life we were meant to have, at least nutritionally. That even Stephen Finney says, if you're not eating a lot of bone broth and stuff, then maybe eating a lot more salads makes sense.
Yeah.
So that you have some way to get in some of those elements that you are missing by not eating the whole animal like we would have, or like they still do in some indigenous cultures.
Sure.
Or First Nations cultures.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of people are missing that, and that's important. And that, as far as your well-being, plus it's a slippery slope when you decide you want to live on paleo muffins and pancakes.
Right.
Those are treats. It's just like when I grew up, it was nobody ate birthday cake when it wasn't their birthday. If you had, you didn't drink Cokes and stuff like that unless it was, you were at a picnic in the park. It wasn't in the refrigerator, and now it's what it is? It's and I realized that because I saw it again in the book just before we started talking, is that this is what they call a dilemma. And what a dilemma is when you learn something and you know something and you are resisting doing what you know. The dilemma is making a decision you don't really want to make. And that's people who are really hurting, who have a lot of health issues. Well, it may be easier to make that decision and say, pancakes, getting up tomorrow morning and having a normal life. Hello, it may not be such a difficult decision. And if you, even Kirk, is it Paisley, the sleep fellow? Something like that. Kirk and Rob had some talks. He says he's working with the Navy SEALs and stuff, and he's getting them to sleep more and he's getting them to eat better. But as soon as they feel better, it's like they don't want to comply anymore.
Right.
It's so the dichotomy is the resistance to taking on what you have discovered and learned, even though it'll be better for you. And in our world now, you've got, I think peer pressure is ramped up between the tweets and the hyper connectivity that's available now. You don't have as much quiet time to go think of something over yourself. Is that, you got 10 people on Facebook saying, "Oh, don't do that. Come on over for pancakes." Yeah. So, there's a lot of psychology in that, and which I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Sure.
Yeah. So they should be eating. To get back to the question, people should be eating more animal foods and animal products that are what we're really designed for, and to the best of their ability, and to as much as they want to, they ought to be getting rid of that other stuff, and they'll be better for it.
And there's another piece of this too that I think a lot of modern paleo or modern media paleo skips, which is just because it's chicken doesn't mean that it's truly paleo, right? Like you said before, this is a really important point. A chicken that was raised in a way that a chicken is supposed to be raised, eating the food that it is evolutionarily designed to eat and be healthy, that is paleo, right? So if you put factory farmed meats and all this industrial, these industrial meats next to the things that our ancestors would have been eating, it's a fascinating difference between those two things that a lot of people kind of miss because they're just like, oh, hamburgers are paleo.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. Again, visiting with Dr. Sebring, we went back and, oh boy, you could get a rant out of him, I promise you.
Yeah.
It's because he raises his own cows and stuff and has them butchered, and he'll say even just taking the commercial raised animal and putting it in the refrigerator and going away for a couple of days, how soon they'll spoil. Besides how much nutrition you'll get out of them. For me, it's a no-brainer is that whenever you can get grass-fed or pasture-raised, it tastes better. I mean, you look at it in the case, and one is very red and vibrant and rich, and then next to it is this pale little thing or gray-looking little thing that's either what they call a chicken breast or a piece of meat, and you would think it would matter more to folks, but unfortunately, a lot of folks, it's just, well, it's there, it's easy, that's what I'll take. Now, that said, is that, yes, that's absolutely the ideal, is to get as much pasture-raised food as you can, and from animals that are raised eating the foods they were supposed to eat. And the come around while people are learning is that, for example, people talk about lean meats. Well, if you got commercially raised beef, you can cut off that fat and then add back in healthier fats, whether that'd be fish oil or coconut oil or avocado or those kinds of things, and move in the right direction, towards more an optimal health situation. Again, it takes people time to learn, but you're absolutely right. If you can get that. Now, in the media, that's often portrayed as elitism.
Right.
They
love to talk about that.
Oh my God. If you can't afford to go to a whole paycheck, there are folks that are really struggling, and they give up, and they're tired at the end of the day. And if they happen to have two parents, they say, and the kids are screaming, they go, okay, fine, we'll go to McDonald's. Giving in and maybe that's the best they can do right then. But sadly enough, what happens is that the media, of course, which is in America, we have commercial media.
Right.
It means it's sponsored media,
right,
and it's sponsored by the big companies that have the money, and the people with the most money are sugar, grain, colas, cereals, and they're the most willing to spend that money to grow their markets. So even though news and whatnot is supposed to be even-handed, I tell you, there are news directors and there are production staff and whatnot, and they all have their own feelings about what you ought to be saying. And it's not even. And they also now, even more so, Good Morning America, Dr. Oz, all of that, they're playing to to what they think their audience will keep their audience watching.
Right.
And real hardcore science and information and accuracy doesn't necessarily sell on their show.
Yeah.
God love them for all the good. Dr. Oz, that's a can of worms. But this last year or so, it's adult live cartoons. It's how do we illustrate this? Well, we build a set and we use balloons, and we have the balloons move through the intestines, and then the balloons come out the other side, and you've got this. There are all these demos that are, to keep people engaged.
Right.
It's the media is a sad state of affairs, and many of their experts that they still call on for morning news and stuff like that are still very vested in the food pyramid and the food plate and what they always thought was true and what they've been telling people for the last 10, 15, 20 years of their career. And they don't want – it takes a real courageous and person to stand up and say, gosh, that's what we thought. But we're wrong. And quite honestly, when you're sitting on the panel on Good Morning America, I don't think they want to get that deep.
Yeah.
So
now, this is the meat. Can you, as a person coming from media, what else do you see that you think people should know on the other end of it? Because knowing a little bit about how it works and being involved with some of that, but we're deciding not to take sponsors, knowing what that can do to the overall message, the people who are looking over your shoulder, making sure you're not saying anything that's too true or, that's too controversial in the wrong kind of way. What else should people know about the media machine where they usually get their information without necessarily noticing that it's propaganda?
Oh, well, what should they know is that I guess the easiest way is to say it's entertainment, not education. It's they they want to keep it, unless it's a breaking news story where some country has blown up or something. The idea is most of that stuff is considered filler and pad. That's why you mostly hear about diets and lose 10 pounds in 3 days, which of course they never used to say. They said, well, if you lose more than 2 pounds in a week, it's a fad diet.
Right.
Now they have people on regularly saying, lose 10 pounds in a week.
Yeah.
And no one says anything.
Right.
They don't say anything, or their resident doctor is sitting there and go, evolution, they didn't live past 30.
Yeah.
And that's why would I want to eat what they're eating? Well, not only is it that wrong, is that there are individuals that have been found that they're as old as we are, but maybe even as old as I am. So that and they died for very different reasons. It's like I'm sure you saw in the film, and like I go into more depth in the book, is they say, well, yeah, they had their problems, but they were very different problems than ours. And they weren't health problems because of what they were eating. It's because they were lunch.
Yeah.
Right. Or they got infection.
Different problem when you're being chased by a tiger.
Different problem, or a giant bear, or something like that. I mean, yeah. So the media, people have to understand that it's a show, and it's entertainment. And I mean, and it plays to what's PC.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, the Paleoista gal.
Sure.
And I've met her, and I think she's doing great work along with Lauren. So let me set that up that way. But what I noticed is when I watched her and when they went on Dr. Oz, and when Dr. Oz and his production staff set it up, is that the explanation was there were two things. One is that it was revamped Barry Sears' zone. Palm's worth of protein, fill your plate mostly with vegetables, which of course is not reflective of the science of evolutionary health, but it's what the audience will buy.
Right.
It's what producers on Oz will buy, because that kind of is very food plate-ish, just a little sliver of fat. It still goes along with the politics of the day and what most media, print, in other words, continually say over and over. So if you say something very different, people are going to go, what? Yeah. I thought I was supposed to eat, and I know you eat giant salads, and it's nothing against giant salads, but it's just that saying that this is paleo.
Right. It becomes problematic.
Yeah.
Because then what are you saying is paleo? Right? Is it the evolution or is it the thing that people will eat today?
Right. Exactly. And in the media, it's basically become whatever people will eat today. And, they're backing off on sugars. Oh yeah, sugar's bad. Oh yeah, healthier fats is better. There's, slowly the naysayers are kind of coming over to this side of health belief systems. And of course, at the same time, then they own it. So, we didn't learn that from the paleo people.
Right.
We didn't learn that from the ancestral health people. It's just that, in fact, you'll like this, is that the first excuse for changing their position on fat with the American, the food plate people was that, we just wanted to keep it simple because we didn't think they'd understand.
Yeah.
So we said, don't eat it, versus, there are good kinds and bad kinds.
Right.
So the thing is, they're even covering their tracks, revisionist history, as we move into this. Yeah. So, so the bottom line, you don't rely on media to get your best information. You might be able to rely on some of the new documentaries, not just mine, but that to find people that are willing to dig in and go beyond what's popular. And that's one reason why you have independent media, why you have people such as yourself doing these podcasts, is because they're the only ways to really get it out, to a larger audience and help more people. Yeah, Yeah, and well, and just as one quick example is if you were a follower of Dr. Oz, in one week you might see paleo, you might see grain brain, you might see vegan, you might see vegetarian, and every single day that you saw that show, that was the best diet to do.
Right.
So I think it if anything, the other side about being entertainment is that it fosters confusion.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're mired in confusion,
You'll keep watching.
You'll keep watching, and the market's not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because those products will continue to sell.
Right.
That they're claiming are okay for you. So
yeah. Oh, it's so fascinating.
yeah, and and I'll just tell it fast, and hopefully you'll find it worthwhile. That I left news because of a health story.
Yeah.
I was in a small station in Bangor, Maine, of all
Bangor,
places.
sure. I grew up in New Hampshire.
Yeah, okay. So it was Channel 7. It was a 3-horse town, 3 stations, right? And it was the beginning of the year, and the Center for Science and Public Interest came out with their annual report of the 10 worst and best foods for you.
Yeah.
So we were Channel 7, so I did the 7 best foods and worst foods for you. And the worst foods were things like cup of noodles because of the sodium and stuff, and McDonald's and this kind of thing. And and I went out and shot the footage, of course, and did the report based on the scientific report that even the national news stations had covered.
Yeah.
Talked about the way it was. My news director walked in and said, "Well, you can't run that story. You have to redo the whole thing." I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, because McDonald's and so they're our sponsors." And that's never supposed to happen in regular news.
Right.
Ever. There's supposed to be a sacred line there between commercial and news. And that was my last straw there. That was opposite than the heartwarming story of why to become an advocate for, the perfect human diet and ancestral health, all of that. It was oh my God, this is really a bad place to be. Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily get better after that happened, right?
Oh, no, the media hasn't gotten any better. Everybody has their own opinion. There's a lot of because of the way the internet has grown, there's a lot of stuff from that is not vetted, so they can say anything and it'll run on Huffington Post as if it was a national news story from Tom Brokaw,
right?
And get the same kind of validation, and it shouldn't. And the thing, again, I saw some stuff recently about paleo and paleo porridge and, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just going, excuse me. In fact, the lead on one story, some young lady who, I looked her up. I tried to find out where she came out. This is like her first job out of college, yet she got to run with the main story. And in her lead, she talks about basically the big guys, the big corporations going after this small little company named Hampton Foods, and oh, poor them. Oh, they're getting beat up because they're trying to come up with a mayonnaise that doesn't have eggs in it. Well, that poor little company is backed by Bill Gates, a mega billionaire from, somewhere in Asia. I don't know. But they're not some poor little company. They're in every Whole Foods. They're massive. They're just as big as, so that's the point, is that these stories can come out and they're tweaked to the reporters or authors' personal point of view, and almost as if they were on their own personal Facebook page, just talking to their friends saying, "Oh, don't believe them. They're bad."
Right.
Well, so yeah, that's, I know I'm going on and on. So there you go.
Well, it's fascinating, right? Because there's the media world, which is a machine, and it works in kind of a predictable way that a lot of people might not be aware of, including myself. I was getting a lot of my information from running magazines, from the media, from conventional wisdom, and that whole side of things, especially when I was eating low fat, as my doctor recommended when I got fat and sick in my early 20s. And then you see what's happened today with the internet and all the things that are clickbait, and running my own blog and podcast and seeing some of the things that get attention, and seeing some of the people around me, how they learn to focus on traffic and the amount of clicks that they get compared to the actual truth that's in whatever they're saying. Those are fundamentally different things. And there's a calculus that goes into creating content, especially on the internet, that is much different now, especially if people are looking to get a lot of attention, a lot of traction. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that attract the most attention aren't necessarily based on the most truth. In fact, that can be the opposite, right? So how do you see things going in the next few years as it relates to that?
Well, I think people have to become more discerning.
Yeah.
It's when I look at that, and I just launched my own blog and stuff, and I'm trying to stay the reporter there and share new science and things we discovered and all that kind of stuff. And I've got like 230 followers, instead of your 100,000. And it's the people who want to become internet entrepreneurs is that they're like commercial television. There's a formula that many of the most successful entrepreneurs that are the early adopters of internet marketing have used, and they sell that as a template. And I don't know why, but it works even if people have seen it 30 times from 30 different people. You say it this way, you follow it with that, you do this, then you give the link to your product. And it's so I don't think that's necessarily going to change because people buy. I mean, it works. As far as an economic commercial engine, and it's made people wildly, wealthy in an opportunity that would have never existed 10 years ago, or a little more. So I don't think that. I think you're right. People have to get their own level of discernment where they know whether a person is, coming from their heart, not just because they're telling you they're coming from their heart,
right?
Not just because I'm telling you it's massive value. More massive value than you've seen anywhere else. And it's only $3,000 because people are getting massive value, don't care about price. Because I told you don't care about price if you think you're getting enough value. So I mean, that's what I see in my limited exposure to that, because now that I'm an advocate, I'm saying, well, okay, like you put out the book, how can I get the word out to hopefully people will buy the book, not just for me, but to get the message. I mean, I'm not going to make a fortune on this book. I mean, the real reason for the book, besides giving people something that they genuinely asked for, was that I thought it would help bring more attention to the film, because books are different. Since I met you and new authors came up, and it's very interesting, is people are very willing to share books. But generally they don't share movies in the same way.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When it first came out and it was all brand new and kind of hot, people went, oh yeah, great. But now I'm not sure it would be one of the first resources unless someone like you or Rob or some says, oh, well, don't forget, this is a really good basic education for all the things we're talking about. And when people do their talks, they quote books, and I've heard quotes from the movie, but no attribution. But books will get attribution. So, and I don't know why, but it's just the way it seems to be going. So like you, it's trying to find a way to, genuinely help people, and not be smarmy, and not sell, label something it isn't.
Right.
And, and have some sincerity, and not just because that's the other thing, is I just don't get it. I know the CJ Hunt breaks down on my show. What?
It'll get some clicks,
I guess. I just don't get it. Why people, some of the internet marketing stuff, it just really bothers me. It's that, I'm so good. I said, well, if you're good, wouldn't people recognize that just because you did good things or you pointed out good things? And maybe I'm old fashioned, but I just see that all over the place, and I mean, that's one of the things I like about you and Rob. It's like, look, we had a story, it's like we were hurting. Rob almost dies. You're fat, sick, and miserable,
sentenced to pill
Following your
popping for the rest of our lives, like everyone else around us. But yeah, it's really interesting to see, especially in the past few years since we met, a lot of people kind of coming in and outsourcing their entire business side because they're the marketers, not the people who are like, we're eating this for dinner. You know, like no one's gonna argue with Rob whether he's paleo or not. I mean, that dude is paleo. I've met him many times and hung out, and it's real. And the problem is, I think a lot of the people who are getting traction these days are not necessarily real. They're not living the story that they're selling to people. And so that's something that's, a big problem in the modern media world. But I think people like you, CJ, putting out your films and your upcoming book and a lot of other people who are really living their own story, they bring it to life and hopefully people on the other end of the message, I know anyone who's listening to this, really buy into the people who are doing it for the right reasons. So keep it up, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the media, I don't know. I have a story I should probably just save for coffee. I don't think we want to air it. So, I know people are going to hate me for this, but ask me after the show and I'll tell you.
Yeah, you bet. All right. So we're just about out of time, but CJ, where can people find you and what are you working on next?
Well, CJ Hunt Reports is my new main site, and that's where everything's been brought together. It's the new home of the Perfect Human Diet film. It's for the book, easy way, like all sites, easy ways to access that at Amazon or your bookstore and those kinds of things. The ongoing blog, which my goal is to bring a different perspective and a different point of view to a lot of these issues than what you would normally find on, because I'm not a coach like you. I'm not trying to teach people how to, lose weight or be healthier in that fashion, and to exercise right. You guys are in a different stage of your life that's all very real. And for me to go back to where I was 24 and try to be that person, would be insincere. So, cjhuntreports.com, and all the links to everything else, of course, are on that site. And the new projects is I'm going to do another film at this point titled Perfect Human Diet 2. And it's to address the questions that have come up since the first film came out, and also to go after it more as an advocate. Is almost everywhere that the film has shown, somebody stands up and says, even in a live audience or whatnot, well, what about the China study? I go, well, okay, what about it? And it's like you're ripping their guts out, because they so firmly believe in that. So we're gonna in a scientific, straightforward fashion, not in a trying to beat somebody up fashion, talk about and get to the truth about the China study, because a lot of people are following that. And my personal opinion is that it's deleterious and, and often abandoned later after people have been doing it for a while. Yeah. And then also to get into the politics of the new food plate, which comes out supposedly in December. And it's not going to change much, although they may do some fancy dancing on the language, but they're still basically, selling cereal, right? And as being healthier than animal foods, and then also to get into sustainability. And as you know, and I'm sure, is that animals could save the planet if they were properly farmed. And grazing the Allen. Oh dear. See, you should never bring up a name you don't remember the whole thing live in this show. So, but anyway, the thing about sustainability and really setting the record straight on that because people don't get exposed to that, So I think that's the arc that we'll be following is the next steps that came because of the first film, and then also much more of like in the book, a more decisive. This is what we really think people ought to be doing. It's who's right, who's wrong, what really works. So, and I think that's the kind of thing that hopefully will create the kind of emotional connection and not just be, the mental side that will help be another level of a wake up call for folks. So that's my long off the cuff commercial about the next film. Awesome. But in the meantime, I want to say a very huge thank you to you, because I'm a filmmaker. I haven't invested my time and life into building a platform and helping people like you have, and to bring the attention back to the film and to this new book. I'm very grateful because, you know, it's a huge help, and it's in getting the message out and helping people have better lives.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and I truly believe, and it's like the subtitle of the book, it's the health and life you deserve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's yeah. So there.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's
CJ, thank you so much for coming on. I think everyone can see and feel your passion for this. You're doing it for the right reasons. We need more people like you. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Abel. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to Fat Burning Man. Don't forget, before you go, check out fatburningtribe.com. If you have a question for me that you want answered about how to improve your performance, what to eat for dinner, how to drop fat quickly, how to improve your overall health, or anything else, we answer all of your questions there. So quickly, you can get the first month for just $1 for a limited time. Check it out at fatburningtribe.com. All right, I'll see you there.
There's another problem with paleo, and this harkens back to the Atkins days and why so many of the low-carb crowd are holding on to pounds they don't want to. I felt this when I lost my first 50 pounds.